Okay, I'm going to call this regular meeting to order at 6:04 p.m. this evening. And it looks like we're starting with comments from the general public. And so,
Yes.
Mark, you want to cue
Yes,
them up?
I would like to ask if anyone from the general public has a comment to please raise your hand. And that means it's a virtual hand. So come on down. Oh, it looks like Mike McCarthy has entered down the other area. I'm going to promote Mike McCarthy to panelist since he is a board member. And so Mike is in with us now. And I am going to go ahead. Looks like Heather Staten is asking to make public comment. So I have just voted Heather.
Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted.
Perfect, thanks. I'm Heather Staten, and I'm the Executive Director of Thrive to the River. And I wanted to comment on the ag tech proposal for the Barrett property that the community college will be presenting this evening. When the Parks District bought Barrett, it didn't do its due diligence to understand the legal uses of the property. In fact, the district ignored the judgment of Oregon's Department of Land Conservation and Development and Department of Ag, who both determined that a community park would not be allowed. 15 years later, and multiple expensive attempts to get a land use permit for a park, the district is still struggling to find a use for the property. Tonight's ag tech proposal is the latest example. Do what you didn't do in 2006. Try to understand the land use laws in play. They've become even more restrictive on high-value farmland like Barrett since you purchased the property. According to Hood River zoning code, public and private schools and colleges are prohibited on high-value EFU. Community centers are prohibited on high-value EFU. Private and public parks are prohibited. Do not imagine that the land use laws will get changed just for this project. The Parks District rolled the dice on that bet in 2006 and it hasn't worked out. The public expects you to spend our money wisely, not continue to throw good money after bad in an attempt to turn around this problem purchase. Your last attempt at getting a permit for Barrett cost the district over $100,000 in attorney and consultant fees. Now you're expending staff time in pursuit of a project that really has no connection to your mission. Your mission is to provide recreational opportunities, not education or job training. Ag tech education is a good thing, but it's not your job. This might be a proposal with a lot of merit, just not at this location. I'd really encourage the community college and school district to consider locating at the experiment station where education is a permitted use. Since the ag tech proposal is aimed at a sustainable future for agriculture, it should respect Oregon's unique land use system that preserves farmland for farming. Finally, the district doesn't have unlimited funds and the public need for parks facilities continues to grow. After 15 years, it's time to pull the plug, sell Barrett and reinvest the money in a property and project that will truly provide a recreation benefit for our community. Thanks.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Heather. Is there anyone else?
Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment? I'm looking in the comments at the attendees, and I do not see any other hands. Okay.
Okay.
So I am going to go ahead and move to share my screen, and you can move on.
And it looks like we need to review the minutes. Have you folks had a chance to do that? And if you have, I would consider a motion to approve the minutes from January 2021.
I move that we approve the minutes for the January 20th meeting.
I'll second. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye. Where's everybody else?
That's good. That's us. Okay, so it looks like we are moving on to presentations.
Yes.
And here we go.
Mark, did we want to approve minutes from the special meeting?
Yes, yes. Yeah, so we also had one set of minutes in there from February, let's see, February 11th, which was the special meeting that we had just last week to discuss the pool opening.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from February 11th.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Show it in some way. Thank you. Okay, it looks like we have a visit from the West Side Park consultant.
Yes. Aaron and Mike, I have just
Yes.
allowed you into the room, and
Oh.
you can mute or unmute. So thanks, Nan. I asked the two of our consultants, Mike Zillis and Aaron Maples from Walker Macy, just to come on tonight to introduce themselves and just kind of say hi so that you could connect them to the project. We discussed their proposal with you at our last meeting, and you gave me authorization at that meeting to move forward with negotiating a contract terms with them, and we have done that, and the contract is just about to get ink on it. We're ready to go, and I just thought I would invite them here this evening just to meet the board and say hello.
That's great. Can everybody hear me? Mike Zilas here.
Yes.
Great. Well, thanks for having us. I'm also joined with Aaron Maples, who's the project manager. I'm a principal of Walker Macy. We're landscape architects and planners, and we've had the privilege of working in the Hood River community for many years at your waterfront, doing planning, actually on the West Side plan and many other projects. So we're just really excited to be here and be invited with a consultant team, including Angelo Planning Group. They will help us with all of the land use issues and permitting. Interfluve, which is a local environmental group, they'll be doing wetland assessment and wetland delineation. KPFF, consulting engineers or civil engineers who've done a lot of work with us in your city. DKS, who do transportation. GRI, who does geotechnical investigation. Pacific Habitat, which does sensitive plant and animal species review. Archaeological, investigation Northwest, looking at any sensitivity there. And then DCW cost management. So it's a very robust team, and we have, we believe, all of the experts needed to help you conceptualize the plan, do outreach, especially in these COVID times, and arrive at a concept for your park that can be tested and costed. And then we intend to move in through the permitting. As you're aware, the district has an opportunity to purchase this property based on the outcome of this effort. So we're very interested in being diligent and very careful about giving you our recommendations and assessing the site and its ability to achieve recreation. Any questions about what we're doing, who we are?
Sounds good.
All right. No, we're very excited to be invited. So thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thanks,
Thank you.
Mike and Aaron. Really appreciate you coming in to say hello.
Sure.
I'm sure we'll all be talking soon.
Yeah, look forward to it.
Likewise.
We'll be in touch. Thanks so
All
much.
right, sounds good. Thank you.
Good to
Thank you.
see you.
Thanks,
Thanks for
guys.
joining us.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Wow.
And it looks like, is Dan here?
Yes, I need to, I'm promoting Dan to panelist right now. And there are two other people here, Yesenia, promote to panelist, and Brian. I think Dan's doing the majority of the talking, but Yesenia and Brian are both here as well. So I will switch over to this other PowerPoint here. I know I mentioned this before. The city has an IT guy that does all this for them, and I'm trying to do it all myself. But got it. Okay. So looks like you can see Dan's presentation on the screen. Dan, do you want me to share your slideshow that you sent me, or would you like to share it yourself? Hello, Dan. Oh, there you are. Hi, Dan.
Mark.
There
Hi
it
there.
is.
Okay, great. Mark, since you have the screens up, the slides up already, and rather than test my limited abilities with technology, why don't we go ahead and maintain that? We would ask you to move through the slides then. And actually, I am going to ask Brian and especially Yesenia to give their perspectives on this. Brian Short, formerly chair of the Board of Hood River, and then Yesenia Sanchez of Old Parkdale Farms Incorporated. And I would like to perhaps just preface this by saying what we are not looking at doing on Barrett, and that is building some school, which it seemed to be an implication that we were talking about a physical construction. What we're doing is talking about keeping it in agriculture, putting it into agricultural production with a focus on students learning about agriculture. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian, and then Brian will turn it over to Yesenia. I will weigh in at slide 11 to talk about the college's discussions with the school district. So Brian, Yesenia, Brian, go ahead. If you're there. Brian, can you hear us?
He's muted. You're
Okay.
muted, Brian.
There you go. How's that?
Hey, there he is.
Yeah.
All right. The Zoom meeting has taken over my whole computer, so I don't have my notes. So I don't know if there's a way to make this smaller, or if it just takes up the whole screen.
If
Brian,
you press
double-
the ESC button, your
Yeah.
escape button,
Ah.
Brian,
Got it. I knew there'd be something simple about all this. All right. Okay, I'm almost there.
Brian Short.
Well, yeah, just as an introduction. So my name is Brian Short. My wife and I own Short Supply. We've been around the gorge for over 30 years. I was a port commissioner for 8 years. And that's really where this conversation for us gets started. But first, I want to say thank you to Nan Notaboom and Mark Hickok for the meeting that we had in November, just to open the door of conversation. And so I want the rest of the board to kind of hear how we came to where we are today in a couple of minutes. And it really started with the Port of Hood River trying to figure out strategically what it could participate in this community in a meaningful way. And Lot 1, which is a 9-acre waterfront parcel, was sitting vacant. And I had sitting next to me on the board, Fred Duckwall, of course, who's president of Duckwall Pooley. I was actively involved with the STEM program at the high school and watching the dynamics of STEM just capture the K through 12 education system. The Gorge Technology Alliance, of course, has now grown to over 100 individual companies and members. And it just seemed to be this sort of synergy of, well, what if you could bring agriculture together with technology and education? And the port had a role in this at some point in the future. Well, this was 3 or 4 years ago. The leadership wasn't strong enough to see this vision, to hold the pieces together and make it move. In early November, I had a wealthy philanthropist in our store, and I brought this vision up of a ag tech corridor, and he said, "How can I help?" And that's when I gave Mark a call and said, I'd like to sit down with you and Nan and talk a little bit. And if you'll open the door, I will start to put together, with lots of support, an organization that now accounts to 18 individuals that represent your entire education system in Hood River County, K through 12, the community college, and OSU. Reaching out to the Technology Alliance to ask them how they felt that their current levels of technology could be applied to agriculture. And then, of course, reaching out to people that I knew in the agriculture business themselves to say, let's get more specific about your needs and how can technology and education help move this along. So while lot 1 on the waterfront got lost, the concept stayed with me. As I mentioned, we've got support from agriculture, and we're looking at labor and efficiencies to farm practices and the pressures that small farms are dealing with. The school curriculum, and Dan's going to speak to that in a moment, how quickly the superintendent, who characterized it accurately, he said agriculture is the cornerstone of Hood River County. And they got together with the college, which is what Dan will talk about. And then we'll talk about this Indian Creek Ag Education Technology Corridor and how it fits within the exclusive farm use criteria. And I'll get into that a little bit more as we move through this slideshow of yours. So Yesenia, you want to begin the introductions of stakeholders and where we are with the agriculture community.
Sure, just a sound check before I get going.
Good.
Good, okay. So my name's Yesenia Sanchez Oates. Real quick, my introduction. My husband and I own Old Parkdale Farms. We're a family farm growing pears and cherries in Hood River County. My husband's a 3rd generation pear farmer, and now we're working on the 4th generation, who little Corbin Oates was born in November. So kind of as all of this got going and I got involved, and so really I've kind of put more energy into this in the past couple weeks. So really excited about it. Before I transitioned to farming full time, I was a business development executive for In Situ, working on projects from Jakarta to Madrid. I've been all over the world, and I know there's nothing more special than this community. I'm now on the board of the Hood River County Education Foundation. So I'll get into this. If you could go back to the first or the second slide, please. So real quick, these 2 images here are images that we saw during the beginning of this pandemic. And I wanted to include this in here because I think if there's something that's really freshly, hopefully on everyone's minds, and hopefully everyone really understands the value of farming, the food supply chain, of knowing where food comes from and connecting to farms. I think that's one of the key pieces of this project that is most important to me. I'm excited to share this concept with you. The sustainability of family farms in our area is really, really important to me for so many reasons. One of the biggest reasons is I want to make sure that my 4th generation family farmer is going to have a sustainable future and a healthy community to live in the future. My experience in the tech world has shown me that there's a lot of value in connecting that talent that we have, that tech talent that we have here in the Gorge, with the cornerstone of our community, which is this agriculture industry. So this project is the convergence of agriculture, technology, and education in the Columbia Gorge. And before I go through all of the slides, I want to ask if you've had a chance to zoom through the slides. Otherwise, I can really quickly hit all of the key points from my perspective before we take questions. So yes to zooming through the slides, or just skipping.
I haven't seen the slides.
Okay, I will happily go through all of it very fast. So again, agriculture, technology, education, it's all part of the community. We need to really kind of keep that in mind as we think about this, or about this project. So next slide, please. So I'm laying out quickly the current ag ecosystem, which includes our valley farmers of farming all different kinds of produce, from mostly pears and apples, cherries in this area, grapes, vegetables, flowers, lots of different produce is delivered to all over the world, but to our community, of course. So farm ag ecosystem includes fertilizer, chemical suppliers, beekeepers, irrigation supply. It's tied through so many parts of our community. We're connected to the Oregon Department of Agriculture, the Oregon State University. We are working with the Oregon State Extension Service. So there's so many different pieces that work together to make agriculture work in our area, but there is a disconnect between the current ag ecosystem and the tech and education ecosystems. There are some connections, of course, but those can be strengthened and really solidified in order to bring more value to agriculture. Next slide. So when I started thinking about this project and I got really excited about the potential to bring more value to farmers in this area, I started by thinking about all the challenges that family farms in our area specifically are facing. And some of those key challenges are the rising cost of farming, market challenges, so declining or stagnant farm incomes, the rising cost of farmland. Farming succession is difficult around here and in many places, and modernizing and improving our farm practices. Next slide. So those were our some of the near-term challenges, and the long-term, we're also facing climate change, rising labor costs, global competition. There's so many different issues that we're facing, and actually Mike wrote an article, a really great article, like a couple of weeks ago in the Columbia Gorge News. If you read that, you'll get a really good explanation of some of those challenges that we're facing. But those are the long-term, some of the long-term challenges. Next slide. So how can this project help farmers in the near term? So one of the proposals is an open source innovation model, which would be helping to build innovation on innovation to make these innovations available and accessible to family farms. There's a lot of different innovation going on across the world, across different tech areas, but a lot of it is not accessible to family farms. Key point here is creating a rural-urban bridge and connecting the community and visitors to our area to agriculture, and to basically help bridge that divide that we have. There's a lot of people that come to our area and people within our own community. I don't know how many times I have discussions with local people that don't truly understand how ag works around their own neighborhoods. And then opportunities for immediate value. Again, I won't go into a lot of those details, but there are opportunities to create immediate value right away for small family farms around here. Next slide. The ag tech project wish list. So again, there's just more value that I think a project like this could bring to agriculture. This is just some ideas from myself and other growers of projects that we would like to see happen at or in coordination with this project. Basically using UGVs, UAVs, incorporating artificial intelligence and automation to help solve some of these ag issues and ag problems that we have. Next slide. So how can this project help farmers in the long term? So creating a pipeline of students that is focused on agricultural and tech careers that will basically help have a better labor force for the future. And I'll kind of skip through that because I think Dan's going to speak to that. But there's so many long-term benefits, and one of the biggest long-term community benefits that I see is, again, connecting the community to agriculture to foster a better understanding and a better relationship to agriculture and how it is a key part of our community. Next slide. So how can this ag tech be different? Key point here is it must be developed with farmer or ag community and community needs as a foundation, and that is what this group is trying to do. It must have the agility of a startup and be results driven, and so far what I can tell is this is moving very quickly, and that's really fantastic because that's the agility of a startup, and it's good news so far. The structure of the project has to really have that cornerstone collaboration, ag, tech, and education. Next slide. Tying it together. So I will transition over to Dan to show one of the opportunities that is being explored right now, and then I'll take the reins back.
Thank you, Yesenia. Am I back on?
Yes,
Okay, great.
you are.
So really, the slide that you see before you captures some of the key points of the discussions we've had so far. We've met, we being Columbia Gorge Community College, our instructional team, meeting with their counterparts at the school district, Hood River Valley High School. One key meeting occurred with those players on January 6th. So Superintendent Polkinghorn, Columba Jones is the principal at the high school there. Josh Robbins, the vice principal, supervising science and CTE. Kate Worster, college and career readiness. From the college perspective, our vice president of instruction, Jarrett Gilbert. Gerardo Cifuentes is our vice president of student services, and Mary Kramer is our dean of career tech education. We do not have an agricultural program at Columbia Gorge Community College. We need to do that. We are in the middle of one of the premier agricultural sectors, frankly, of North America. Look at the variety of crops right here in the Columbia Gorge, high value crops, traditional crops, going farther east into wheat and other things. So it's really been a priority for us, and this opportunity to have an outdoor learning lab so close to the high school and so close to the college is something that we would love to see occur. It's not the only option out there, obviously. Our focus is on developing the program, doing the things that Yesenia has been talking about, the points that you see on this slide here, offering high school students an opportunity to earn early college credit, talking about sustainable practices, farm management, succession planning, forestry, sciences, environmental studies. We have a well-established UAS, UAB training program at the college. There is no good test site to offer students a hands-on site around our campus in Hood River. So this would be an opportunity for that in conjunction with the applied technologies that students would be learning, bringing UAS and UAB to bear in terms of remote analysis of soil content, moisture, plantings, things of that nature, things that could be done on this parcel. Again, it's not the only parcel, but one thing I do want to emphasize is that we would be placing Barrett into agricultural production. We're talking not about building a facility there. The facilities already exist, the high school and the college campus itself. It's about farming, but about teaching students to farm. So farming is going to occur, and the people who are going to be doing the farming are the students themselves and their instructors in concert with the farm community. And that's the other big point that I really want to focus on here. This is not going to be something developed in a vacuum in academia. Everything that we do at the community college in terms of career tech is driven by industry. Our renewable energy technology program, guided very, very closely by industry partners in the field, our nursing program, and we see this in the same light. This is not something where the educators get together and put together a curriculum and then send it out to the world. This is something where the agricultural community, in this case, comes to the table and helps define and develop that curricula. That's how we've always done things in the past, and it's certainly how we would approach something like this. The land use issue, I know, is sensitive. I've been around the area a long time myself, going on over 50 years now, and I understand the sensitivity. going forward, we would need to find some way to make this a win-win. We realize that there are resources committed to Barrett. We realize that the Park District has a recreation focus. The college has an education focus. The high school does too. And then we have the agricultural focus underlying all of this. How do we bring those things together, and how do we move forward and make this really a win-win-win for the different parties involved? That's probably my spiel, and I'm going to turn it back over to Yesenia.
Thanks, Dan. So one of the locations that we have talked about as a place that could be a host for this idea, this concept, is the place that was formerly proposed to be Barrett Park. So we've thought through some of the pros and cons at a high level. This space connects the high school, the community college, so it'd be easy access for students to come to this ag space. I call it ag tech space. It is EFU zoned with allowable uses for agriculture and airfield. The Hood River it's very close to the Hood River population. So if we do look for an alternative place, we'll be trying to find something close to town so that we could have participation from others, not just people in the Upper Valley in the ag or downtown, so that we could have more involvement from the community and from that tech talent that is really critical to this ag tech idea. And really important, again, is that rural urban bridge. Next slide. Again, there are cons, and this is just preliminary. I'm sure the list goes on both the pros and the cons. We are just asking for an opportunity to fully review all of them. So although this project is agricultural focused, the educational and tech elements in the traditional sense may not meet what is traditionally thought of as EFU land, or even if we looked at something that's not EFU and then we tried to do farming on it, we would kind of be caught in the middle of anything, because really this is something new. So farming is taking a different shape in the future. I will skip to the next slide, please. Go through lots of different points here. I'll hit the high points. So one of the positives of this idea is the Indian Creek Trail. So I think Dan had a few points to add here.
Yes, thank you, Yesenia. So currently the Indian Creek Trail terminates just immediately south of the college campus. It's actually on the edge of property owned by Providence Hood River Memorial Hospital. As you probably know, there is a private parcel immediately to the south of that before the trail picks up again at Indian Creek, at Broken T Drive, rather. Part of the vision here, and I know there are certainly challenges, there are certainly unanswered questions, but part of the vision would be to connect Indian Creek Trail, bring it all the way through from the high school, from the Ag Tech parcel, Barrett, if you prefer to call it that, and moving north all the way through to the college campus. It's a vision that I've worked on for the better part of 10 years, focusing on what I've called the Indian Creek Corridor, the Greenway around the college campus. But this would be really a way to focus community energy on making that happen. We could if we could develop a shared vision that brings together the different elements that we're talking about here, including Barrett, the high school, the college, Indian Creek Trail. There are so many promising facets that we can bring to bear. We could develop a community campaign that I think would be greater than all of the individual things that we're talking about now. You develop a vision and you go from there, and the sky's the limit. So yes, indeed, completing that trail, I would love to see that happen. Right now it ends, as I mentioned, on the college campus. We have some problems because of that. You've got some illicit camping that takes place down there. And then you simply don't have the joy and the pleasure and the opportunity to follow the trail to the south and complete that vision of making this trail a reality. So enough from me. Back over to you, Cynthia.
Okay, am I muted? Okay, so this
No, we can hear you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So there's a few slides here that show ideas of different concepts that are different similar projects that have happened in other places around the country. Again, this is developing and is something really broader than this, but some of the ideas for recreation's role, again, would be having this site as something that could host recreation, like I think Dan covered the trail that would go around, basically an opportunity to bridge the community in this space in the future, potentially again with coordination with other organizations in the area. This could potentially host the farmers market to sell the produce that comes off of it or is produced on this property. Let's see. I didn't, Dan or Brian, if you have anything else to add in this one, from this one.
Well, there were three questions that are pretty prominent. I think one is the EFU question. You know, does EFU allow this type of use on the property? You know, why the pace? Why is this group moving so fast? And how much will this cost parks? What kind of impact is this going to be in the parks budget? So let me address EFU. First, of the 18 people that are involved, we do not have a land use specialist. And Director Cavallari suggested I talk to Cindy Walbridge, who, you know, prior to becoming, you know, the city planner, was also a county planner. Cindy, in her wisdom, introduced me to Jim Johnson, who's the Oregon Department of Agriculture Farm Land Use Planning Specialist, who's been in that position for 25 years. He's also a past Gorge Commission planner, a Wasco County planner. He was the Farm Forest Specialist for Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development. So this is a guy with a substantial background. We had a brief conversation earlier today, and then we sent him this PowerPoint presentation to kind of begin the conversation to say, of the vision ideas that we've presented so far, how do we stay inside the EFU designation? And he's offered to help us become a navigator to that issue. So I don't have an answer for you. We don't have an answer as a group for you, but we are heading down that path. He also, incidentally, Mike, he said to say hi. Apparently he's got a background with you. And I said, all right, well, I'll pass that along. He also introduced Hillary Foote, who replaced him as the Land Conservation Development Director, who is a farm and forest specialist. And so I'll get a hold of her tomorrow. So we'll have these two individuals helping guide us in this EFU discussion on this property and the narrative that we put together in this PowerPoint presentation. The second question, why the pace? Well, part of it has been the enthusiasm of these 18 people. And unfortunately, the meeting schedule of the group and the meeting session of the Parks Department board meetings and a criteria to get on the county's prioritization list didn't jive very well. And so that presentation was made to the county's working group. And currently this project is listed as number 5, acknowledging that there are questions out there for us to solve. I've talked to Representative Williams and Thompson, and they like the concept and have encouraged us to continue moving forward. I'm hoping that we can get enough questions answered that we could actually make a grant application for phase 1 and the second part, which is a sustainable grant application. So how do we take this property and work it into a sustainable operation so that it can continue to support itself? How much will this cost parks? Well, at this point, having your parks director and periodic meetings with the park board is going to be our only ask. Everyone agrees in these meetings that we have last 60 minutes. So these 18 people are well prepared when they sit down, and that 60-minute is one of the most productive meetings I've sat in on. What we need from you is we need your support. We need your support to continue moving this vision along, solve questions, gain our state and federal representatives' endorsement, and apply for state and federal assistance. I think that's kind of my piece without preempting any kind of questions that you've got. I noticed that we're, hang on a second here. I wanted to see where we were in our timing. We are 23 minutes into a 20-minute offering. So I think as a courtesy, we should probably back ourselves up a little bit and Director Notaboom or Mark, maybe this meeting needs to go back to you and tell us how you want us to answer questions and what your thoughts might be as a board.
Brian, you did say you addressed, I think, 2 of your 3 questions. The cost to us, could you talk about that?
Well, we have no specific financial request because of the characterization of all the people that are participating. They're working on their own, out of their own budgets, the school's budgets, the college budget, the university budgets. The people that are involved in agriculture are essentially donating their time. Technology people, they want to know where we're going with this so they can start looking at how they can apply their resources and begin to participate with us. So there's no financial ask that I can see on the near term from the parks. There's other than your support and putting this piece of property, inside this this vision as a part of the piece, part of the exercise we'll go through.
Mike, one last comment. Hopefully, I'm just trying to get this in real quick. So this concept is, I think, independent of any piece of land. I think it's something that's so important to our community and so important to agriculture. Innovation for the future is the way, and really bringing the community together is the important part for me. So that's just the key piece that I have. Hopefully there is a place, and maybe this Barrett parcel is the right place, and there's many reasons why I think it's a potential location that would be fantastic. Looking at what the Hood River County's EFU policy is EFU is meant to help foster existing and future farm practices, and I think those future farm practices are what would be coming out of this concept. So yeah, that is all I have. Thank you.
And I think Mike has a hand up. Mike McCarthy.
Yeah, I'd like to enter in on this conversation a little. First of all, my first impression is it's a very interesting idea. The one thing I would say is please don't refer to this parcel as EFU. It's not EFU, it's high value farmland. The criteria for what you can do there are very, very different. It's probably not an allowed use what you are proposing. And because the Parks District has already spent $100,000 fighting land use battles, I really don't think that we want to, as a Parks District, enter into this again and have another bill for another $100,000 to try to put something in that's really not an appropriate use in the zone. So that's really the first thing, and that is that's a legal thing. Also, I don't believe it would meet the requirements of 215-296, which you should study. Because of what will be going on there. So that's another concern. The other concern is if this group really wants to do it, I would suggest that we put the property on the market and they purchase it. And to say that really no cost from the Parks District, we are putting a piece of property on the in the mix that's worth $1 million, or we've spent $1 million on as a parks district over the years. So we've got $1 million tied up there, and we really ought to be selling it. We're a very small, underfunded parks district, and we really can't afford to keep that parcel, especially when our primary mission is the pool. We do not have an education mission. And I just really question whether it's the appropriate thing for us, because we're not an education district. Now, maybe we could get the people to vote us in as an education district, but my recommendation would be is we put it on the market and the group can buy it, and then they can try to shoehorn in something in there that may not be an appropriate land use and try to pay to have it done. The other thing I'm very curious about is why the Hood River Grower Shipper Organization is not involved, Columbia Gorge Fruit Growers, which represents 300 people. And if it's really going to be a group that is involved with agriculture, they should be definitely included. And the one question I would ask the group is there anything that is being done here or proposed that is not already being seriously researched in the Northwest at this moment? And I think there's a really robust research going on in all these areas. So it's really a question to me of why they think that this small group in Hood River would all of a sudden be able to advance ahead of the hundreds of groups that are already working on these things. So those are my first impressions.
So I guess I have a bit of a different opinion. I am super impressed with this proposal, and I am certainly really excited about any opportunities to use, to share and collaborate on park land for the purpose of education in particular. That said, I totally hear Mike's comments and understand all the rules around the land, and do encourage, would agree with all of that we shouldn't be spending any more money trying to figure out whether we can use this land for various things or not. But I think what I heard this group proposing is that we just put in our support for the idea and put in the possibility that should the group invest further, that this land could be one of the possible options for this site. And if that's the case, and we're not spending any money further on our own legal ramifications in terms of figuring out what can and can't be done, then I would support it as being in the mix of one of the possibilities of a future site for this project.
One thing I'd like to add, I get what you said about the innovation thing, and I totally get the land use thing. If we can't do it, we can't do it. Well, two things I'd like to add. I don't favor us paying to find out if this can work or there or not. Somebody else would have to pay for that. And second, one of the things that we haven't really talked about, and this doesn't really have anything to do with Barrett Park, when Tony Guista was describing the help that he needs and the employees he's looking for and the labor that we're lacking, he can't necessarily afford to hire someone with a bachelor's degree from OSU. He needs someone with maybe a little less, that he can afford, maybe with an associate's degree or a certificate, and that this might be a way to get that to fit that niche of employee. So that's just two little things. Anna, I think you were going to go next.
Yes, I'd be happy to chime in here. I am really impressed with the presentation. I really think it's an amazing idea, and it's something that I want to support. But when we discussed this at our meeting last month, I think I voiced some of the same concerns Mike brought up and that Heather stated at the beginning of, I am concerned that our mission isn't education. While everyone is in support of that, of course, I think that we do need to really make sure that, I think this could be a really incredible program, but I think that we really do need to make sure that it's even a viable land use option at Barrett. And I appreciate Yesenia what you said too, of like this idea and this concept isn't married to the Barrett location. It's something that could happen somewhere else in this community, and I think that would be incredible. I also know, like I was pulling up Article 3 of the Hood River County Land Use Code, and pages 8 and 9, and Brian, and I'm happy to send this to you. It does say that, you know, community centers are prohibited uses, schools are prohibited uses, public parks are prohibited uses on high value EFU zoned property. So I think that it's great that you have some good contacts of people that we could talk to find out if it is a viable use. But I also think, you know, we do have a lot of money already tied up into this property, and we have a lot of other projects and obligations as an entity that we need to be addressing, which is our pool and, you know, acquisition and development of community parks on property where that's actually viable. I love the idea, Dan. I'd love to see, you know, our community college have a good, strong ag program. It's kind of surprising that we don't. And I'm definitely in support of the concept, but I'm not sure. I'm not 100% convinced that how parks can really help with this. But I'm happy to keep the conversation going. And if you guys can give us the documentation that shows it's a viable use here and present that to us from a land use and a legal standpoint, I would be open to it more so from the parks perspective.
Glenna, your microphone's not on if you're talking.
Unmute. Okay, is that better?
Yes.
So I think it was a great presentation and a wonderful idea. And I think it's great that we could be interested in the education of our community. However, I have to agree with Mike McCarthy, and that is that we should put the property up for sale. And if they're interested in this project and have put all that time and effort into it, that possibly they should have to worry about the land use things, and that we have already worked through and are finding that it's not possible. And I don't want to spend any more money on that involvement.
Any other questions for the group here?
You know, and Nan, I'd add something to this, that there's a lot of opportunities in the valley with cooperators, and that's how OSU does it. Is there's a number of cooperating growers that already have these things going on that they cooperate, and there's a lot of people are quite willing to cooperate on any educational activities and have interns and so forth. And the one thing I'd add also is that it would cost about $1 million to plant that orchard, another $1 million to get equipment to farm it. And it is a requirement on farmland that you're supposed to be in the business of making a profit. And that is a legal requirement of the land use system also. So if it's funded as a school and it does not have the intent to make a profit, it's also not a valid land use. So, and you can act like I'm really opposed to this idea, and I'm not. I think it ought to go on at the experiment station, and I think you could have hundreds of farms in the valley that would be willing to cooperate and even donate pieces of land for a few young people to grow crops on.
Okay.
I guess I have a question for you, Nan. Are we trying to, I'm confused at what our conversation is. Are we trying to make a decision as to, I guess one is, do they need a decision from us or just a direction? And I'm hearing us kind of mixed in terms of what our direction is. And then it sounds like we're also starting to have a conversation about whether we should or shouldn't sell Barrett Park. And I don't think that's the conversation we're prepared to have today. So I'm just curious as to what's next. You know, how do we wrap up the conversation? What's the goal? What are we expected to give them today?
I mean, I think that they were just testing the level of support, not only for the project, but for even the possibility of Barrett Park being a place for it to be located. A lot of what we've, what we're concerned about can be answered, but I don't think we have those answers yet. Like, is it allowable? How much will it cost? Will they, I think they know that we will not pay to find out if it's allowable, because that is one thing I have made clear in our previous meeting, that we won't, we're not going to be the ones to find out what's allowable there. It's got to come from outside this. And they've completely they said yes. And we asked them that tonight, and they said, we're not asking you for any money. But I think it's great for them to hear all this, because I mean, I said, you need to bring this to the board, because we got to get the whole view in here. And I don't know that we need to make a decision, because we don't have all the information yet, and neither do they.
Well, that was part of the presentation too. On slide 19, it says we're not, Brian and Dan and Yesenia aren't asking us for a decision tonight. They're just asking, for the gift of time. That's what your slide says. To give you guys an opportunity to do the due diligence. Is that correct, Brian and Dan and Yesenia?
Yes.
Yes, that is. And I think a follow-up question to that might be, how much time could you give us? We know that you're under constraints. We know that your resources are tied up in that parcel, and we don't want to drag that out.
So Dan, what do you mean about how much time we can give you? Do you mean before we sell that property to someone else?
Yeah. Would you feel comfortable giving us a few months to explore this and to answer the issues that Director McCarthy brings up are very valid. The college is no more interested in taking on a headache. We are looking at solutions, and we're intrigued by this. We'd like to explore it. We'd like to have answers coming forward. At the end of the day, it would be good to come forward with a project that would have the entire community behind it, so that you don't have a legal battle. We don't want that. We don't want to go there.
And I also, maybe the vision, we've talked about this, like, what is it? I don't think that's been clear, because it is not a school. It is not a park. It is not a building. I think that one slide was a little bit misleading. If anything, we talked about plots being assigned to certain classes or grades. And so the footprint of it is, I don't think that we have a good, clear picture of that, what that might be.
One of our next steps is to have it to basically focus more on the ag community. So Mike brings up a good point, including Columbia Gorge fruit growers, and gathering more input from the agriculture community to define what this would look like to better serve them.
And one takeaway from the preliminary meetings is that the ag community is wildly enthusiastic about this, more so than anybody. Now I didn't talk to every single person in the ag community, and maybe the group that Mike saying we need to talk to them, maybe they'll feel differently. But what we've heard so far has been them being very excited and very supportive. And of course, they don't care where it is. They just like the idea, the concept.
Well, they said we don't have to make a decision tonight.
No.
And I certainly would be willing to give them 3 to 6 months to decide what they can do.
Well,
as long as it's not going to cost us a lot.
I'm definitely in support of the idea of it. I think that, as a board, our conversation about what we're going to do with Barrett Park needs to happen in executive session, because that's a real estate, real estate transactions topic. But I guess, your ask is a year or less to let you guys do your due diligence. And I guess what I would propose is, please come back to us when you have an idea of how much time you need to vet this property as a viable location for your project here. And if it does look like a viable, you've done your due diligence, you can find that it's an allowable use. And because I thought it was super interesting too, Yesenia, that you brought up the point of, well, you kind of need EFU property to do this on, because you're going to be doing agricultural things. There is a distinction between high value EFU and EFU, and that's important to note too. But I would ask that you come back with a proposal and let us know, this is if it's viable or not, and let us know how much time you need to get that dialed in. And then, that gives us a little bit more information to make a decision on as to what our level of support can be.
I like that approach. I think that is very logical, and I think it's something that all parties would need to address very quickly here. Can high value support this or not? If the indication is that it cannot, we don't want to get into a fight. There are other options. We don't need to go there. If there is a definition that shows that it can work, then I think the next step would be to ensure that we have community support from all parties, so that we don't get into a challenge down the road and we don't get into a long court battle over this. Again, that's not the route that we want to go down.
Well, and that's just one piece that, I appreciate that you guys really have a big project going on. That's just one piece of the puzzle. Like Mike brought up, you're still going to need, hundreds of thousands of dollars to invest in actual crops and, equipment. And I loved the idea too of having a farm stand there, which is an allowable use. It looks like in the zoning code, you can have a farm stand, but it would be, I could see the potential there. It could be really awesome, but it would be helpful to know from your perspective of would the use be compatible with that property, and if it is, do you have the resources and that community support? Can you get the money to invest in it to bring it to fruition? Because that will be the other tricky part.
It will be, although those costs would be associated regardless of where we put it.
You're right.
Yeah. To me, the issue of land use planning, and I, as a former city councilor who went through a Walmart siting one time, I am very, very, very sensitive to that one. Let's nail that one down.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Any more questions from our group of presenters here, y'all?
No, one last thing, Yesenia, congratulations on your baby. That's so awesome.
Thank you.
You guys did a great presentation.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on this agenda. It looks like we're doing some budgeting and goal setting.
Yes.
Mark, you ready for that?
I'm ready. Sorry, I'm switching PowerPoints. Let's see. Sorry. Okay. Goal setting and strategic planning. I put together a little presentation here, and we are going to review some planning documents, specifically our most current master plan, and specifically in the goals and the capital strategy section. And then talk a little bit about our current situation, and then get into some of the election cycle timelines of when we could move forward with something kind of bigger picture, and then talk a little bit about strategy and discuss that. goal setting and strategic planning. Before I get into our plan, I thought I'd look way back to an older plan and just talk to you a little bit about land use planning, or specifically land architecture. So the Olmsted brothers, there was a man named Frederick Law Olmsted who was the original designer of Central Park. And he is known as the grandfather of landscape architecture in the United States. And everyone studies him, and it's just incredible stuff. He had two sons, Charles Olmsted and Frederick Olmsted Jr., and they started a company, the Olmsted Brothers Landscape Architects. And in 1903, they came out west and they did the city of Spokane, the city of Seattle, the University of Washington campus. And on that same trip, they spent 3 weeks in Portland and wrote up a memo, the report to the Parks Board. And I will send you guys a link to it. It's pretty amazing. It's about 60 pages to read this, this thing and to see what they were talking about then, and then see what we're talking about now. Is just absolutely fascinating. But as I was looking over their points, they start off with a bunch of points there on landscape architecture and their strategic planning. I highlighted a couple of them because they seem so apt with what we are talking about. And that's number 11. Parkways should be acquired betimes. It's particularly urgent that cities having beautiful local scenery adapted for parks and parkways should secure the land betimes, lest these natural advantages be destroyed or irreparably injured by the owners. And then land for park systems should be paid for in long-term loans. In the case of money borrowed for acquisition of parkland, it should be borne in mind that the land is an asset that will be worth more in almost every instance by the time the loan becomes payable than the amount of the loan. And I think what they're trying to say here is get the land while you can, because it's not going to get any cheaper, and it could be going away. And I wish that Hood River would have gotten a copy of this memo in 1903 as well, because here we are in 2021, and we're still trying to play catch up and get pieces of property and trail easements and all of these different connections and things that they thought of back in 1903 in Portland. Let's see. So, sorry, my screen share is a little off here. So I looked up the goals in the executive summary area of the master plan, and I just thought I'd go over some of the instead of the 20-some pages of goals, just kind of the high-level ones in the executive summary. And so these were separated into 5 different sections. Parks, just what we were just talking about, park acquisitions, acquiring additional parkland necessary to serve the area. Focusing on neighborhood and community parks, improving park sites to provide a diverse range of active and passive recreation experiences. And then riverfront parks, focusing on the waterfront and such, and then county regional parks, providing opportunities for residents and visitors to experience day or overnight basis. The county had asked that we put that goal in. Other ones around focuses on open and natural spaces, open space and natural area restoration, recreation programming, aquatic facilities, provide opportunities for aquatic recreation through the area's pools and riverfronts. Indoor recreation facilities, one that we haven't focused on much, but definitely something that we've been talking about with community centers connected to aquatics. Specialized facilities, sport fields and court facilities. And then looking at trails, urban and regional trails, primitive trails, trail acquisition, and then the administration side of it, which is the planning and the asset management, maintaining partnerships, and funding the resources and community involvement. I went back and looked at the master plan, and I don't expect you to read all this on your small screen, but if you remember right, when we had put together a capital improvement plan with the master plan to look at all of these different areas that we need to be investing in. And I wanted to bring this slide up just to talk about all the work that we did in the master plan that was just adopted this last fall by the city and the county and the port and us. It's time to start following the book and pulling the book out and kind of following the playbook and what we have already decided on doing. And so there is a list of areas that we really should start investing in and looking toward. But then the question is how do we do that, and what steps can we take now to do that? So I like to bring this slide up at least once a year just to remind everybody where we're at. When you look at the rest of the parks districts around the state, we are in a tough spot at 34 cents per thousand assessed. And very far behind. Now remember, this is our operation dollars. It's not our dollars for acquisition and construction. But whatever we acquire and build, we do have to maintain. So we do need to address this. We did discuss a little bit at the last meeting that we have a pretty healthy SDC. It does not fully fund what we needed to do, but it's coming in at a pretty good clip now. We've been increasing it, and we do have the ability to bond against that capacity or to borrow against that capacity. So when you think about it, we could get around between 1.5 and 4 or 5 million, depending on the terms of the loan, if we wanted to borrow against the $140,000, $150,000 or so we bring in per year on the inside the UGB assets of that. Options for raising revenue. We've talked about this before as well. Local option levy. These are all if we go out to the voters and ask for money. So we could do a local option levy that would create a funding, but it has to be imposed every 5 years. In order to do this. So it's not sustainable. That's one of the problems with the local option levy is every 5 years you go back to the voters and you ask them for this money again. And if they say no, and you are using this to make up everything that you need to run the park system, then you are shutting down parks and laying off employees, and you're in the situation kind of like the county was a couple of years ago, where they closed 3 parks, and so it's a tough spot to be in. General obligation bond, that is going out and asking for a bond to invest in a facility. That is if we needed to purchase new parkland or rebuild the pool, we could go ahead and do that. But again, that's just capital money. It does not give us any more operation dollars. And like we had mentioned, if we build new capital, we're going to have to eventually maintain it, especially if we're talking about building actual parks. Now we could go out and buy land that we don't have to put much maintenance on. But once we start developing parks, we need more than just the general obligation bond. And then the reforming the districts, and that's what we have talked about before, where we dissolve and reform the district, and that just sets us up with a higher tax rate, and then we can bond against that tax rate as well. So we had decided to do this last spring, right before the pandemic hit really hard, and then we decided to pump the brakes on that plan and pull it off the November ballot. But those are really our 3 options for raising our operation dollars and being able to be a more sustainable park system. There's other things that can chip away at it, things like a foundation. Usually those don't pay much in operation, but there are some, creating some sort of parks foundation to help supplement this stuff. Grants are usually, again, just specifically for the building of new assets, but not for ongoing operations. So it's really the ongoing operations that we need to work on. So I looked at the elections in Hood River County and thought I'd put a couple slides together just to kind of let you know how the timing of them and when they come out. There are usually 1 or 2 elections per year on the first Tuesday in May, I'm sorry, the third Tuesday in May or the first Tuesday in November. The odd years may not have an election. So like this year being 2021, I checked with the county and they don't have anything scheduled to go this year. So we probably won't have an election this coming November. The even years are usually a very big one in November because that is when federal things come out every 4 years, of course, the presidential election, and then there are representatives and both on the state and federal side, and also city council goes in those even years. The election timelines, the deadline for the ballot information to get out for a funding measure, if it's a bond or a levy, it's pretty easy. It's just 60 days notice. So mid-March for a May election or early September for a November election. But when we're talking about dissolving the district and reforming the district, remember, that's not something that we can just do ourselves. We have to ask the county to put something on the ballot in order for them to form a new parks district. And then we dissolve our own parks district. And with all of the different deadlines for them on proposing this, it works out to about 7 months notice that we need if we're going to go forward with the dissolving and reforming the district. So just to kind of show you what that looks like, you know, if this coming May, if we wanted to put something on, we already missed the window for dissolving and reforming the district. That would have been around November that we would have had to have a decision made. Now, remember, of course, this is when we have to have the decision made. So probably back that up to, you know, 2 or 3 months before those, and when we're really talking about it and getting things figured out. For November of 2021, currently there's nothing scheduled for that, but we would need to have a decision by April next month if we wanted to go this coming November. Now, just because there's not something scheduled doesn't mean that you can't put something out there. The problem is that the boards that put something out there have to pay for the entire election themselves. So if we split it up with, say, you know, 20 other things that are on the ballot, it might cost us $1,200. But for us to do a full election, it's around $30,000. And so it's also a tough spot to be, to put something out and be the only ones on the ballot, because you have to convince everybody to vote in a time where they're not voting for anything else. And so that's a tricky spot to be. There's questions on whether or not November or May are the better strategic areas to go. You definitely, if you're going in November of an even year, you're getting a lot more people. We saw Portland this last year in November 2020 pass a big parks bond during the presidential election. Some people don't like November because tax bills have just come out. So people have just gotten their bill and see how much that they're already paying for government services, and then they're voting right afterwards. The May elections are ones that are a little bit more local people voting. I mean, I shouldn't say local people, everyone's local that's voting for it, but it doesn't have nearly as big of a turnout. And tax measures don't do quite as well in May as they've done as they do in November, but the county did just pass their levy this last May. Of course, it failed the May before. They've chosen to go in May for theirs. But it's really it's tough when you're looking 6-7 months out. Just so you know, we've talked before about, you know, failing upwards, and if we put something forward, say November 1st, you know, 2022, you know, for this, and we had the decision to do that by this time next year. If this failed, then we would need to make a decision that November 2022, at that very next board meeting, 2 weeks later if we wanted to go and try it again in May of 2023. And so it's a quick turnaround time if you're going. Otherwise, you're having to skip a year, and if you skip a year, then you're going to this November of 2023 that might not be scheduled. And then you're either looking at this, May of 2024 or the following year in 2024. So it's difficult to choose something. You've also got other funding agencies that are going out there as well. You could have, the school district or the city going for something, or fire districts. We just don't know until we just choose a date and put something out there. Looking at strategic planning, and I'm just going to wrap up here real quick, and then I'm going to let you guys do the talking. But looking at strategic planning, the decisions are where should we allocate our time and resources in the fiscal year 2021, which of course is July through the following June. How long term should we be thinking? And what I mean by that is, what actions can we take right now that address our needs in 2025, 2020, 2040, or 2040, or 2060? And I'm talking about like long-term park acquisitions, rebuilding the pool, trail connections, partnerships, forming this Parks Foundation that we've talked about a lot of times, thinking of rails to trails, the corridor. And then, we've talked a lot about recreation and community ed and maybe taking that on. Right now, the school district hasn't been doing recreation and community ed with the pandemic and such. And I don't know about their plans on bringing it back, but I know that there's a significant void there if they don't. We've talked about it before, and we don't have the operation funding to take that on at this point, but how do we get there? And then looking at, specific projects that we already have on the books that we're already planning for, like the West Side Park planning and permitting, the Indian Creek Trail Southside Connector construction, which is in permit right now, and hopefully we will find out in the next 2 or 3 months where we're going with that, and I'd like to start construction this fall on that. And then I'm keeping dog park construction on there, although we haven't heard back from the city. We are still ready to go. We did hear from the port recently that they are interested in this and us continuing with this, and as soon as the city gives us a green light, we would like to be able to move forward with dog park construction. Last year when I looked at it, we did our strategic planning in March. This year we're getting a little bit earlier step with it, with starting in February, but this is definitely something where it could be something that we talk about over 2 meetings. I've given you a lot of information right here, and we could move on and talk about it some more in March, but I'm interested to know what you're thinking about right now with how we set ourselves up for the future, thinking about what we do this year to set ourselves up long term.
I'll start. I think that we need to get our redistricting plan on the ballot as soon as is reasonably possible. I don't want to pay for a whole election, and so that would be May 17th of 2022. Thoughts? I mean, I just saw so much on that next slide that we can't do anything. Like, we can't do anything about the pool until we fix our funding issues. So we can't just, we're stuck.
I would be curious to know if, Mark, you said that we would have to pay for the election this November if no one else, like we would be on the hook for the whole cost if no one else has any ballot measure. It's kind of a catch-22 because we also don't want to compete with, if the city's going to move forward, which I think the last thing I heard, they're not planning on moving forward with the new police station. But how do we know for sure that there isn't anyone else that is going to have a ballot measure? And then I saw Susan's comment that when, I think it must have been the Protect Our Parks ballot measure was on the election in November 2019. They weren't required to pay for that. It'd be interesting to get some more details on that. So are we positive that we would be on the hook for the full cost if we went for November redistricting ballot measure this November?
That is what the county told me, and I can look into that on why the Protect Our Parks measure didn't have to be paid for. Maybe it had something to do with the fact that it was a vote of the people in order to put it on the ballot, because they went out and got a petition. My guess is that the city probably foot the bill up for it, or had to foot the bill for it because it was the will of the people, since it was a initiative campaign. Someone had to pay for it, and I don't know if it was the city or the county, but my guess is that the city had to pay for it. But
Anna,
I can check with the city. Yeah, Deanna.
Anna, you're suggesting that maybe we should go in November if we can.
I still lean towards the redistricting option, but I agree with you. If we could do it sooner than next May and we could do it this November, that would be my preference.
I agree. We should do it as soon as possible.
You know, we have been discussing this redistricting thing for what, 2 years now? And it was probably 3 years ago, we went out and made our plea to the people to rebuild our pool. The pool's going to fall apart before we finally get this done. And I think that we should get on that redistricting thing and see how we come out on it as soon as we can.
I agree, Glenna. I don't care who else is on the ballot. It's our turn.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yep, me too.
If we had to, if we did have to pay for it and we were the only ones going in November, do you think strategically that's the best way to go?
No.
What did you say it would cost, Mark?
$30,000.
$30,000?
You have to pay the mail for everybody or the printing and mailing out a ballot. And that's just an estimate. They weren't quite sure because it depends on how big it is, how many pieces are in it. I mean, when you think about it, splitting it though, if there's one other thing, then it's probably half that. It's probably $15,000. When we elect board members, we have to pay. They send me a bill for our section of it. Of course, we're splitting that with, water, soil conservation and transportation districts and port districts and everybody else. So it's usually about $2,000, maybe $1,200 when we elect board members. But it is just split amongst all the different agencies that have something on the ballot.
Would it be cheaper to ask Ruben to check check the Secretary of State website, make sure we have to pay for this?
Yeah, we can check with Ruben and I can figure out why the Protect Our Parks measure didn't pay for it, but somebody paid for it, and I don't know who that would have been.
Yeah, that was a good comment from Susan Crowley, and we'll have to look into that. I suspect because of the county's finances, they're going to do everything they can to not have to pay for this. They're pretty tight situation too. I pretty much agree with what Glenna said, that we need to move ahead. I think we ought to spend a little time though trying to determine, like from some expert, I don't know who it is, and hopefully they're cheap, but how this works if you're the only one on the ballot, and what that gains you or what you lose by doing that. And if you're the only one on the ballot, you certainly have the potential to direct the total conversation, and it's not going to be diluted out by anybody else. So that's a real plus. The one thing that strikes me about this, though, looking at when Mark put up the whole strategic plan or our whole master plan, is that we don't have the swimming pool and the aquatic center really in big enough letters compared to everything else. And not on this one, but going way back, Mark, yeah, I mean, but if you look at the master plan too, there's 57 different items there, and the aquatic center's one tiny little line. And I think we all know that somehow or another, we've got to make sure that in our own minds and everybody's minds, that's the priority for now. Because I agree with Glenna that we're going to find ourselves in a real situation here in a year or two if we can't move ahead. So I'm for moving ahead unless we can see some indicators that it's a really bad decision based on what happens if you're the only one on the ballot in an off year. And I don't know how we find that out, but.
Yeah, you definitely want to be strategic about it. And your first move out of the gate is usually pretty telling, and you can see where you're at from it. So if you go during a bad time and it's your very first shot at it, you usually aren't upping it to go for more money the next time. You're going backwards the time after that. So I think that those are great points, Mike.
I'd imagine, Mark, there's also an opportunity where we can say we want to put ourselves on the ballot, but then there's a point at which they tell us how many other things are on the ballot, and then we can make a decision then and pull out at the last minute if it's going to cost us $30,000. I don't think the right thing to do is to spend $30,000 to put ourselves on the ballot, but who knows what else might go on that we split with a bunch of ways or something. So I assume there's a process and a point at which we can take it off.
Yes and no. I mean, yes, there is a point. We can. There's a date somewhere around August or so that things are needing to get actually put on the ballot. There are some things that we would have to do with the county voting to dissolve our district and all of these different things ahead of time. So we would be putting a lot of work into it before we found that out and found out how many other people are going for it. But I will.
Would it be work that would be done regardless, and then that work is done in time for the next time?
No.
You know? Oh, you have to redo it again.
You would. Yeah, because what the county needs to do, well in advance is they need to advertise that this coming election year they will be dissolving the Parks District. Now, within 60 days of this thing. It's all stuff that has to do with the state attorney general's office on timing for these different things. And so once you start that ball rolling, and that's why the last time when we pulled it in April of last year for the November 2020 ballot, and it was supposed to go on May 2nd or 3rd at the next county meeting. We were supposed to get on their agenda for them to announce that they were looking to dissolve, because they announced that they're dissolving our district, and then we announced, I think somewhere around July, that we're reforming a new district and what it is and all of this different stuff. So you can kind of unring that bell, but you can't use that work and then move it forward again. We'd have to do it all again.
Okay.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing from the group is to do some more research on who pays for the ballot, and maybe talk to the city and county and other agencies and see if anyone else has anything that they think might be going on the November ballot, just so we can see if we have anything else to help split the cost. And then maybe I will see if I can get a hold of some sort of a political consultant and see what I can figure out to answer Mike's question of strategy behind being the only one on a ballot measure, or being one of 2 or 3 on a small ballot measure, versus going on a more crowded time when there's a lot more people voting. Because I think that we do need to think about strategy on that.
Could you also find out, like, if we are a go for November, what steps we need to go? Like, Glenna, you brought up a good point about, we talked to folks about, funding for the rebuilding the pool 2.5, 3 years ago now. So we kind of need to up our outreach again. And part of the reason why rebuilding the pool is the same size as these other things is because the feedback we got back then was, our constituency that uses the pool aren't the only voters. Like, we need to reach out to people who also want the parks and the trails and these other things done. So we really need to have it might be like a working session or something once we know when we're actually moving forward, of what we as a board can do to help generate positive support for this ballot measure.
And you know, this might be a perfect time to focus on the pool. There are a lot of people who want us to open that pool again. And I think that hopefully they would be favorable for it and help us out with this election.
Yeah, I agree. I think not just the pool, but recreation, outdoors activities are really the safe things that people can do right now. And I could imagine us having a good message at this point. And also, I'm not so sure that it's a bad thing for us to get an election that doesn't have the majority, that's not a big election. You know, I mean, if we do a good enough job of getting the word out, it could actually work in our favor to have people who are interested in passing the park be the only ones voting. You know, I'm serious.
No, I can totally see that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark, sounds like you have some direction there. What else do you want from us?
So we had talked a little bit at the last meeting about how the board felt about borrowing money against the SDC funds in order to be able to purchase acquisition or land or trail easements or different things like that. Even West Side Park, if we move forward with that process, we could always borrow money against the SDC revenue. I wanted to get a little bit more feedback from the board on how they feel about being able to do that and about being able to have the ability, if the right purchase or the right piece of property came up, to be able to jump on that piece of property or that trail easement, rather than waiting to save up enough money, and the land might not be around in that time in the future.
So I have a question, Mark, about the rates of that, because I'm on another board and it's actually making sense for us to get a gigantic loan because the rates are so low and they're lower than what would be normal, cost of living rates even. Like they're at 1%, and we know everything else is going to go up at least 3%. And so it makes sense to have the money at such a low rate because the money alone will make money for us. And I'm just curious if it's something similar in this case.
I am going to promote Monica. She is in the audience, and we're going to move her up because she knows a lot more about the interest rates. I will tell you that I do know that interest rates are very low right now, and I've had conversations with the city as well, who can loan us money as well for park acquisitions and such. They said the money is not a problem for them. The problem is having a funding source to pay back the money. And so they have funds like a fully funded equipment replacement fund that they legally are allowed to borrow from in order to do that. Now they do need to charge us an interest rate on it, but it's a market rate and kind of a lower rate. There's Monica. Monica, did you want to talk? Did you hear the question?
I did hear the question, and interest rates are very, very low right now, and that is worth exploring and having conversation, especially if you're local banks.
So I think that's a great point, Suzanne. So if we don't normally have this kind of opportunity to have such a low interest rate and be able to purchase something with the incoming money that's coming in from SDCs. Right now, we have between 130 and 150,000 that comes in per year on that inside the urban growth boundary SDC, and will be going up because we are going to be raising the rates again this year.
But I guess, besides having the money to use to spend, if borrowing the money makes money for us because it's enough money, because the interest rates are so low, then that alone would also make sense to me.
I understand the strategy idea behind that, but is it fiscally responsible to borrow money? I don't know, like, not to go back to sitting on an asset that, to Barrett, but as opposed to selling something that we know we can't develop. Like, I don't know, that's gnawing on me.
So if you borrow some money to purchase an asset and the interest rate is so low that the money, if you didn't invest that money and you had the money sitting in the pool account, let's say, being invested, and we're not even earning as much. And that's a great question. It's a little bit hard to explain, and we can put it together, but the interest rate is right now very, very low. If you have an asset that you don't know what to do with, but you have land right now you don't know what to do with, it's not going to decrease in value, right? It's only going to increase in value. And if the increase percent is greater than your interest rate from your borrowing, there's some analysis to look at there.
So Anna, I think that you were alluding again to the Barrett property and us sitting on the Barrett property. The one thing to consider, to remember, is that because we have half of the value of that property is state park grant money. If we were to sell it, then the clock starts ticking. We have 2 years to buy another property of equal or greater recreation utility. And so until we have a decision on, say, the Blackman Skakel property, on if we're going to go for it, meaning that we have a permit that says that it's okay to spend that, we would be setting ourselves up to make the decision to sell it early, or to go ahead and put it on the market, or sell it before that is there. We'd be setting ourselves up to lose a lot of money, which would be paying back half of that amount. So unless we had another property.
Mark, I want to wait until we are a little bit more sure of the Skakel and Blackman property. I agree that we should sell the property that we have, but 2 years isn't very long, and I'm not sure that it's long enough to do all the planning that we need to do.
Well, that's not really, I mean, that's not really my question. I guess, I guess I want to go, I need a little more clarification of why we're borrowing money, or if it is just for strategic purposes, or like, exactly, do you feel like we need to look into borrowing money now just because the opportunity is good, because the interest rates are so low and everyone's anticipating that they are going to go up again? Or I guess why are we discussing borrowing money, I guess is the question.
I think my answer to that, Anna, is that we need to be ready if the right property comes along, or we start seeking out property. We just got our marching orders from the master plan saying where we need to invest in parks, and that we need to start looking around at these places. And so I think that we should be strategically looking, if we have the money right now to tie up some of this land, we need to start doing a land grab and land banking right now. That's my opinion. I don't know if it's the opinion of the board, but I think that we need to just start getting all of these trail connections that we need, and getting the land that we need, start getting it all tied up right now, before it's too late, before that land is no longer available. I think that it also sets us up, if we are going for a ballot measure in the future and we've purchased a couple of these land things, it gives us something to talk about for things that we would like to create. So we basically say, we've purchased, 5 acres here and 5 acres over there, and we would love to turn it into a park, but we can't do that until we have the operation dollars in order to do that, and we have the capital building dollars to build this property. And I think that it makes a stronger case that our park system is kind of stagnant and set in time until we can until we get the operation dollars to move forward. But if we've looked in advance and we've anticipated our needs and purchased the property, I think that's being good stewards of public land. I mean, you look at the school district and their property off of May Street, They purchased that in 2006 or 2007, and they don't plan on building a pool there. I'm sorry, building a school there until 2036, I believe, which is the next time that they'll be able to do a bond in order to build a school. So, that was 30 years in the future before they even break ground on that property.
And I mean, it's not just your opinion, it's what the master plan says. That we've invested a lot of time and money and energy in. It says that we need to do these things. Just as a reminder, not that I have anything specific in mind, but yeah. A lot of the ones that are on there are smaller, more smaller parks, neighborhood parks and so on. And so I think that's maybe what Mark is thinking of. If something like that comes up, if there's an opportunity, are we willing to borrow money against future SDCs, right?
Yeah, even the Campbell property is within reach. We could purchase for what that was for sale for. There is a star on that one on our map on the master plan in that area, and we could purchase that property and make the trail go through, and have kind of a nature park area with some wetlands and such. I mean, we could make these investments right now.
Okay. So what do you guys think about that? Borrowing money for land acquisition?
I personally think it's an important piece in us doing what we said we're going to be doing. I think we're pretty stagnant right now with our limited staffing and limited funding, and I think it's an important piece that we need to do.
And just a reminder, we're just talking about theoretical land acquisition. We're not talking about anything specific. And of course, we do not talk about real property transactions during the regular meeting. Anyway.
I also think that perhaps, though, if we were to do it, we maybe wanted to make as a board a plan for what the intention, at least, of the borrowed money would be. Like, do we want to specifically say it's for future land acquisitions? Do we want to specifically say it's for a dog park or whatever,
I was talking more in generalities about the policy decision on whether or not the board believes that it's a good policy to borrow money against the revenue in order to make land acquisitions if we need to. I wasn't talking any specifics.
I
think as a policy, generally, it's not a good idea to borrow money unless you know what you're borrowing it for specifically. So I think it's kind of a premature discussion, but then when you throw in the low interest rates, I think it's, I don't know what to think.
I guess I agree. I wouldn't call it a policy around borrowing money, but I do think that it's a strategic, at this point, it would be a strategic decision, and I think a good one. But a policy about borrowing money makes me nervous because I agree with Anna that you shouldn't generally borrow money. Just borrow money.
Wrong terminology, but I guess I'm taking the temperature of the board on how you feel about that, and if that's something when we're talking about what we should be working for in the next fiscal year. Should I be looking at land acquisitions? Should I be looking at things above what we normally have in our SDC account in order to secure these lands? Do we want to be securing lands for well in the future on properties that we probably won't be developing for 10, 20 years?
I mean, if something comes up, I want to know about it and I want us to talk about it. Yeah. And I would not rule out borrowing money. Is that kind of what you mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think from a strategic planning point, though, I prefer our focus be on, the longer term sustainable funding that could be done either through, ideally first through the reformation of our district, and then alternatively on a bond or levy measure, a bond measure. I think that should be
I
more of a
agree.
focus.
I think that's really our goal. If you want goal setting, that's one that I'm really want us to stay focused on. The redistricting.
Okay.
I agree with that.
I guess I have a clarifying point though. The redistricting will give us operation dollars, but in terms of big dollars to be able to do land acquisition, we need larger sums of money. And I'm not sure that I totally agree with a levy or bond versus borrowing money, because if we could borrow against SDCs and repay a loan with SDCs, then we're not burdening our taxpayers more. So I see it as a viable option that doesn't necessarily require us to burden the taxpayers.
Mark, I think that you probably need to have a discussion with bond counsel on how that would work if you, with the plan to move forward to redistrict. That probably will throw some wrinkles in any debt opportunities. So I think that's obviously more analysis has to happen, but I think that's a big question as well. I don't know how that would work, if it would be come due immediately upon resolution of a district. I don't know, but you probably want to talk about some bond counsel, maybe Ruben.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We did have that conversation with Ruben before over what sort of assets and contracts and obligations roll over into the next Parks District. And there is procedure for that, but I think that debt is definitely something that needs to be explored on how that goes over, especially if the district is dissolved and there's a new district. That might also be a little different if it's a bond versus a loan from the city that's being paid back over something else. So, but something we would need to address.
And currently we don't have any debt, correct? We're not under any bond payments.
Correct.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's another reason why reformation is ideal at this point. Sorry, Mike, did you have something you wanted to ask?
I just sent some contact information for Mark.
Oh, great. Thank you. Okay. I'm ready to move forward.
Okay. Okay, so we provided direction. Looks like we're going to reports. How about a finance report? Mr. Hickok, but Monica's right there.
Monica.
I am. Let me open it up. Not the only thing that's getting any action really is SDCs. How about that? What are you putting up?
I just put up SDCs because you just brought it up.
There you go.
Yeah.
Do you remember, not too long ago, I was commenting about how the inside was lagging, and we did get that one big payment. So that brought them right up. So this really is the only activity happening, and I've labeled here so you can see what's happening, what a development project is, and what the capital outlay is, just for your information. So this is SDCs. Next.
That's good.
Okay. I keep trying to find ways to put this up to where you can actually see something because it's so much information. But for revenues, as expected, the COVID relief funding is ended at this point, but still who knows what's going to happen. We have our fingers crossed. Of course, interest rates have tanked considerably. The only thing that really is truly coming in is our property tax revenue, and that's two reasons. One, is it the Hampton, the hotel downtown came on the tax roll,
Yep.
and the city's district. Which one was that? The downtown district that forgo taxes for
Yeah.
the year?
Urban Renewal District, yeah.
Yep, their urban renewal. So that was very helpful, as you can see. Other than that, if you skip over to our expenses, nothing really out of line, nothing of concern. Repair and maintenance, Mark can speak maybe a little to that. That's really just doing a lot. You know, we usually have the shutdown time in the fall and do a bunch of repair and maintenance then. We didn't have that this year, but we have moved forward with some repair and maintenance. I'm sure Marcy will cover that too in her pool report about some of the activity happening there.
Is the COVID relief funding going to payroll or to repair and?
It's a combination. So it's a combination of expenses, PPE, you know, required stuff, additional cleaning, supplies, and payroll. There was extra payroll we had to have just for extra cleaning routes, that sort of thing. So it's a combination of both.
And the reason, Suzanne, that we broke it out and put a separate section for COVID relief up here was to try and not muddy it with everything else in there. Because originally we had talked about just charging it up against the grant, but then, you know, we'd be extra high in, say, supplies this year. And we didn't want to create these anomalies so that when we're looking at a graph in another year or so, we're just like, oh my gosh, they spent, you know, $25,000 when they usually spend 15 on that. So that's why it's kind of a lump sum all going into the COVID relief expense area.
Oh, okay, so everything that's in that 38,000 is not included then in the below,
right?
In the payroll expense. Okay.
Oh, correct. It is not double accounted. It is literally segregated. These expenses, the COVID relief expenses, are everything outside of payroll. What is payroll covered under the COVID relief is only payroll that was already budgeted. So for example, Mark's time, you know, maybe 10 hours of his time went to COVID work, and we could do a pass through to get the reimbursement for it. We didn't segregate that out of his payroll.
Because I was getting paid anyways. There wasn't extra time like an overtime charge or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
And
that's it. Well, there was just one other, which was the improvement fund, and nothing's changed in there.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you, Monica. Director's report. COVID-19 response. Monica talked a little bit about that, but so we've been downgraded from extreme risk to high risk. We talked about that at our special meeting this last month. And our crew's ready, getting the pool operational. I think Marcy will talk a little bit more about that in the aquatics report coming up. CARES Act and FEMA funding. This is a frustrating one. We've been dealing with this for a little bit now. The FEMA actually just sent me something today where, so I had a meeting with them last month, and the guy said, look, I can't tell you anything because when President Biden came in, we got a new memo that pretty much said, stop everything you're doing and all the rules are going to be rewritten. And so he's like, we're just wasting our time if we talk about stuff. So, just basically sit tight, and in another month, I'll be able to tell you a little bit more. So I got an email from him today, and he sent me a huge document on a lot of their new rules and things that are changing. I still don't know where we're at with it, but it seems like a lot of the procedures and rules are changing on that. There's also the new stimulus money that's going through the federal government right now. They are trying to, the Special Districts Association of Oregon, I was working with a lot of other special districts associations across the country and trying to get that a specific line item for special districts. We don't have that yet. But they are asking for our support to try and get that. We're hoping that we can get that because that way it will bypass the state and we can go straight for the federal government for that funding. So we're in kind of a holding pattern to try and get paid back some of the expenses that did not get reimbursed by the CARES Act. We're hoping to hear more in the next month or two. And maybe month or 3 or 4 before we hear on that. We do have one vacant budget committee position. Paige did say that she would come back, but Gary Reed actually asked if he could leave ours. He was appointed to the city's budget committee and really only has time for one of them. And so we put out the notice in our last newsletter, but if any of you have anyone that you know of, what I'm asking is that they email me with a letter of interest by March 15th, which is a couple days before our next board meeting, so that I can get it in the board packet for you guys to approve somebody for that. We like to have 5 budget committee positions. If we advertise for it and we don't get one, it's okay for us to move forward with just 4. In fact, the city for a very long time has not had a full budget committee. But it's great to try and get other perspectives, and I love hearing our budget committee members and seeing what they have to say that are on it. So if you can think of anyone, let me know.
I think we'll at least have one applicant. I've already had somebody approach me because they read it in the newsletter.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Arrowhead Drive, they have seen an uptick in traffic lately, and they have contacted me again. I actually went out and met with the neighbors and met with 14 neighbors at 10 a.m. last Monday morning. And for the most part, I really just wanted to listen to them and hear all of their concerns. Their concerns are that, you know, they live on a what they thought would be a quiet dead-end street, and that they have a lot of cars that pull into people's driveways to turn around and park, and they let their dogs out, and the dogs, you know run across properties and such. It is a public street. It's a county-owned road, and so everything that they're doing is legal there, except for sometimes they do block driveways or park in front of a mailbox. I reached out to the county to see what the county could do, and if there was some striping that they might be able to do in front of mailboxes or something. The county said they really can't, and that they can't mark it as a no parking area. So, you know, the control that the Parks District has is pretty low on what we can do. We don't manage the streets, and we can't tell anyone not to park there. The neighbors have decided to print flyers telling people that they suggesting that people park over at Golden Eagle instead of in front of their homes. We are not a part of that. It's their right to do that, and they can print their own flyers, but we're not doing that along with them. But they also asked about our signs. They don't like having the signs up front because I think that this is a little bit too inviting. Now, a couple of these signs they actually have asked for in years past, which is these dog signs right here. But they asked if I could remove all the signs and the dog pot thing and everything, which I think could lead to some issues if there's no more, you know, doggy bags and dog poop areas. But I went into our county, our conditional use permit for this area, And it is actually a conditional, a condition of of our construction of the trail right there to have some interpretive signs. And we need to have signs talking about dogs and cleaning up after your dogs, and the hours that the trail's available and different things like that. So we do have to have signs here. I'm trying to compromise with them. And I'm looking at this site. So right here is where the sign is. It's right up next to the road. And it's a little confusing because it's right on the cart path. There's an area a little further down here that you can still kind of see from the road, but it's pretty far down, where the trail veers off of the cart path and the trail really starts with the gravel. So I thought about moving the signs and the dog pots system down to here, and then up in the area where the sign is, putting some sort of a one of these brown markers that we're going to be putting on the trail, just to let people know, because I'm afraid that if a person's going to pull up there and they're not going to know where the Indian Creek Trail is, and you see this cart path and you don't know what that is, and that could lead to more confusion. So we could add one of these markers that says Indian Creek Trail with an arrow that's a little less obtrusive. It might make the neighbors happier. And then down here where you see this arrow, that's where these signs will be relocated to. So I went out and met with the manager of the golf course. This is their property right here, although we do have a 20-foot wide easement through their property, but this is their property where these things are. He is totally fine with us moving it down there. And we talked about a couple other areas where we could help try and kind of create some of those wayfinding to move people off onto the trail. So I don't know if we'll please everybody. I don't know if that's possible. But by moving this trailhead signage down here, I think that we're still honoring what the county wanted us to do in our conditional use permit. And I think the neighbors would appreciate it being moved. So I just thought I'd bring that up to the board and see how the board feels about moving these trail signs. One other thing real quick before I ask you that, we did also agree with the neighbors that we would advertise our parking areas. So we, in our last newsletter, did put a pitch out there for parking at Golden Eagle Park, and we'll probably do a social media post as well about using Golden Eagle Park for trail parking. So how does the board feel about moving trail signage for this area? Mike, I see your hands up.
Yeah, it's great, Mark. You're going to the extra effort to have a conversation with the people. I'm just curious, though, functionally, what will it do for the situation to move that sign down there? I mean, it sort of is doing what they asked, but how will it help the situation?
One of their points is that they believe that this area is too inviting for strangers to come down there and use the trail. They don't mind people passing through there, but they think they believe that we were not supposed to create an inviting parking trailhead in this area. It's not quite the case. That I think that our previous director, Lori, back in 2006, wrote a letter to them saying that this would not be a parking trailhead, but that's the quote that she used was parking trailhead. We don't list it as a parking area anywhere. We do list it as a trailhead, just like there's lots of places. Dutch Brothers Coffee is a great example of a place where we have zero parking and zero authority to tell people to park there, but everyone uses that as one of the main trailheads for the Indian Creek Trail. And there's lots of examples, 20 or so examples all over town of trailheads where trails cross streets. And we're not telling people to park, at the end of 7th Street where the 7th Street stairs are, or, lots of places. Even the college and the high school where there are parking lots, we don't have parking agreements with those two entities. Really, the only parking lot that we have on this trail is the Golden Eagle parking lot. But this was a specific request of theirs, some of them wanted us to remove it altogether. I don't think we can't do that because of our permit. And I don't think that that's the right thing to do. But we can relocate it.
I actually like the place where you're proposing putting it better a little bit, Mark, because it is easy to follow the cart path down that way instead of going into the bridge there where the trail starts. So I think it's a more, that way also people aren't pulling over on the side of the road and grabbing dog poop bags. Not that I've ever done anything like that, but I think it's, that's kind of really where the trail starts, and I think it's totally appropriate, and I think it would be a nice gesture on our behalf towards these neighbors that I know are struggling, and it's a shame they're gonna put ever since we had I used to park there all the time, and ever since we had the conversation, I don't park there anymore. I always park it. So Mark actually called me and asked me to see how many cars were there when I parked there, and I'm like, oh, I don't go there anymore. They don't want me there. I'm not gonna go there anymore. And certainly, if someone put a flyer on my car, I would never park there again. I'd feel so awful. So it'll probably work for them putting flyers on people's cars, is my guess. And moving the signs is. I don't think it's outside people from out of the area that are parking there. I think it would be hard to find if you were an outside area. Most likely it's local people.
Agreed.
They claim that there's a lot of out-of-state parking or out-of-state license plates that park there. But
no way. How would they find that? If they were going to find a trailhead, it wouldn't be that one.
I know.
Yeah. And then I did do your research as I promised, Mark, and every time I never saw more than 2 cars every time I drove by.
I agree with Suzanne. I think it's a nice gesture, and this is an area that you've gotten a lot of feedback from them and requests from them for the last couple of years, it seems like, to do something to help mitigate the parking there. And I think this is a nice gesture for sure, and I think it'll look good too. I've been confused about where the first time I was on that trail, where the trail actually started. So I think that's a good location. I'm all for it.
Okay.
I think that you've gone beyond the call of duty, and that will probably satisfy them.
Good job, Mark.
All right, thanks. We will move forward with that. All right, that's it for me. I get to quit talking.
Okay, what's the report?
All right, well, I think you can go ahead. So that's our quiet pool, right? That's my
view right now.
That's the view, right? I'm moving back into the office probably tomorrow afternoon. Times they are a-changing. So just so you know, the data that we had talked about last week has been released. And so Hood River is doing so well. And we have, if this were our movement week, we would be considered in the moderate risk category, which is great news. I do think it's important to point out that we did have a major snowstorm, so there was not a lot of testing going on. So that's something to just kind of keep in mind going forward. But nonetheless, we're in a pretty good place with our numbers. So even with the numbers for next week, we should be in really good standing moving forward for the next few weeks. So that's great. So the floors are in progress. The reason I am working from home tonight and not in the office for this meeting is because apparently it's pretty loud.
Well, I have the earbuds in.
And the progress is a little bit slower than we thought, but the pictures on the left are kind of the before pictures, so you can see a lot of cracking and wear and tear. And then they're literally grinding off the top and then going to replace that sealant. So Mark might have a little bit more update on what the floor situation is.
Yeah, so they had scoped out 4 days to do the entire replacement and started on Tuesday. So they were going to be done on Friday to do both the men's and women's room. And the first 2 days was just going to be demolition. They're still working right now. They were here till 11:30 last night, and they have only been in the women's room. They haven't even started the men's room yet. So we had a little powwow with them this afternoon and talked about you know, that we have to open on Monday, and we are opening. And so they have decided to focus on just the women's room and not the men's room right now. And then we will try and reschedule the men's room for the next time we close, probably if we do shut down again next fall. That way we don't end up in a situation where we can't open. And they have some new equipment coming in that they actually just drove up to Seattle to pick up, and they are bringing that in tomorrow. I guess it's a sit-on unit that they believe will finally tear this down. When they first came out here and bid the job, you know, they looked at some of these cracks here and thought that they'd be able to just like throw a small blade underneath and chip this stuff up. And they said this stuff that's on there is harder than the concrete below it, which makes it a little difficult because the second they get through, then they're hitting the concrete, and so they don't want to mar the concrete so much. So it's been very tricky for them, but they are. It looks like tough work in there. They've all got big respirators on and lots of equipment, and they're on their hands and knees grinding and, you know, and working on this stuff. So hopefully we have some beautiful new floors in at least the ladies' room coming up on Monday when we're opening.
I must say I'm selfishly happy that they chose to work on the ladies' room first versus the men's room. If you don't mind just flipping back to the last slide. So just so you know, pool reservations for the pool, for signing up for lap swim or family swim or therapy pool time goes live tomorrow. We have staff training happening this weekend, both Saturday and Sunday. And then we're planning on opening on Monday morning at the crack of dawn. Hopefully I'll be able to go to master swim practice at 6 a.m. on Monday morning and be a much happier person for it, for sure. So there are a few health and safety things that we'll update with our staff and the training, and then they will definitely be updating their lifeguarding skills. And then other things, we do have to now do contact tracing for everyone, which shouldn't be, we were already essentially doing it anyways. There were just a few, like, family members weren't always, we didn't always keep track of like the kids that were coming in with the family members. That was mainly the main person on the reservation, but that should be a very easy thing for us to adjust to. But those are the main things. Swim lessons won't start right away. We'll probably give it a few weeks, get our feet underneath us and make sure we have enough staff and that sort of thing. And then we'll get that going very shortly thereafter. And then otherwise we have been busy just with working on things like the domestic hot water heater. We did have a tear on the inside panel for the west wall. If you'll recall, our tent panels are double layered. And with the windstorm that took place a few weeks ago, we had a tear to the inside, which we won't be able to take care of until we have another shutdown period with the tops off, because it requires a large lift to come in and do repair for that. So that's about it.
Darcy, does a tear to the inside panel mean it went all the way through, or it's only on the inside?
It's only on the inside. That material, so if you'll recall, we have had a couple of repairs to the tent panel. And the last time we had a repair, they did a really good job, and they put basically a new piece of fabric over the old piece because the old piece was, just decaying. They weren't able to do that on the inside panel. They just patched it and kind of taped and sewed it together, right? And the wind, when it came through, the wind is still able to get through. It just tore, some of that.
There's about 12 inches between the two panels on the end caps. And when the wind gets in there, it just goes back and forth and just rips it apart. And so that area that came off, a lot of it was being held together with Velcro. And I think that some of that tore apart right there and came down. So
Maybe we can use some duct tape.
Yeah,
So it was Velcro and zip ties. It's now that material is just so fragile. We're really gonna have to figure out what the best solution is. And we've talked to a lot of different people, sale companies, and you know, so hopefully we can figure out a good fix that will last us for a couple of more years.
It'll be difficult to get to too, though, because it's up in a spot where a normal ladder can't cut it. We're gonna have to get a lift in here.
And even the lift is it's a pretty difficult reach. We have the largest lift and the largest reach that has to be just articulated to the right spot to get there. So it's actually a pretty difficult repair that we'll have to be innovative with.
Mm-hmm. We'll get to see how good of a lift pilot our new maintenance guy is. Our last one got it in places where contractors were like, there's no way you can get a lift in there. And he took that as a challenge.
Maybe Andrew will come back just to do us
just to get the lift up there for us.
Totally. Well, if there's anything else, any other questions about pool reopening, but otherwise we're all, you know, all hands on deck and all ready to go. And I'm looking forward to being back at the pool.
Are the chemicals and the heating seeming like they're cooperating?
Not really.
Kinda. We've had a few hiccups along the way, but I think that we have some solutions to most of our issues, and I think that we'll be doing okay.
We have 2 or 3 contractors coming in tomorrow, and one coming in on Tuesday for the heat. So we're getting there. It's all you could go out there and swim right now. It's just not going to be quite comfortable yet. The good news is the indoor areas are very comfortable. The locker rooms have steam in them for the first time. I've never actually seen steam coming off the showers before. And so, in fact, we have a contractor coming in tomorrow to try and get us to turn the temperature down a little bit because there's something with the mixing valve where it's just a little bit too hot right now. We don't want to burn anyone. So, but I never thought that we would have a problem with our showers being too hot. All right. I do have an executive session item if that shouldn't take too long to talk about.
And so I think we just need a motion to move into executive session.
Mm-hmm.
I will make a motion to move into executive session.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So move that we move out of executive session.
Second.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor? Yeah. Okay. Back to regular meeting.
Nothing else.
Are we in regular meeting yet?
We're in regular meeting. I think we need to make a statement that there were no decisions made in executive session.
There were no decisions made in executive session.
Now?
No, I don't think we need to make a decision.
No, not about property, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think we're ready to wrap up.
Yep.
Okay.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, see you in a
Bye,
month-ish.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Okay.
See you
Bye.
soon.
Enjoy the pool next week, Marcy.
Thank